What's up, kinfolk? It's RJ Young. I am not on a step mill. Consider hitting the like and subscribe button because I upload a video every single day. It's always college football related, sports related. We have a good time. Today, you're getting a third consecutive live stream from me. And that does not necessarily happen all that much. But you know what? When we are cooking toward the college football playoff, it happens more often than not. We do the Monday and Wednesday thing at 3 o'clock live. You can download that show on the RJ Young Show podcast, where there are no ads currently, so it's ad-free listening if that's what you're into. Also, yo dog, I did the college football playoff instant reaction show where I watched it along with you and reacted to it in real time. Some mistakes I want to correct in there that I want to address in this show. Also talk a little bit about how we are talking about BYU, how we are talking about the Big 12, how we are talking about Georgia, and which teams do we think can make it into the college football playoff that perhaps don't have an outside chance because, well, it's been done before. But I want to start this show by talking about some recruiting news, as Korey Foreman's father spoke with Greg Biggins over at 247 Sports. And while it has been interesting to watch recruiting in this era, it has been so interesting to watch Korey Foreman's recruiting in this era. Now, it is not as bombastic and laden with fireworks as Zach Evans' recruitment in 2020, but it is far and away one of the most exciting recruitments that we have had for the 2021 class. Starting with the knowledge that he decided to decommit from Clemson in April in the middle of quarantine in the midst of the pandemic, at a time when Ohio State was coming on really strong. LSU was showing out really greatly. Alabama looked like they were dead in the water, only to assume the number one spot by August. And on we go. Like, there's so much moving and shaking that has happened between the time that he decommitted and this time now as we head into December. Even as he was committed to Clemson, there are folks that have covered him in California, in Corona, at Centennial, that always thought that USC was going to be in the mix because it is SC. Because the brand name of USC still means quite a bit, not just to you and me, but to the kiddos, particularly the kiddos that grow up in Southern California. I know kiddos that go to Michigan, kiddos that go to Ohio State, kiddos that go to Arizona State, kiddos that go to Oklahoma, kiddos that go to Florida, kiddos that go to Texas, that still have some love for USC. And it has been an unlikely landing spot for some of the best talent around Southern California the last few years, even as you got to go back to 2016 for the last time that USC was continuing with the big dogs in college football. Even so, Clay Helton has landed Chris Steele, 5-star corner. He has landed JT Daniels, even if he transferred, 5-star quarterback. He had Bryce Young in the boat before a late flip to Alabama, where he is the true freshman now. He's been able to land Brew McCoy after first having him in the boat, losing him in Texas, and then getting him back onto campus and playing wide receiver out there at SC. He's had Kyle Ford. He's continued to groom pretty good quarterbacks. Keaton Slovis was perhaps the third best quarterback on the depth chart, maybe the fourth best quarterback on the depth chart last year. And then JT Daniels blows out an ACL. Jack Sears transfers. Matt Fink is not their guy, except for that one time when he beat Utah somehow, some way in a remarkable game. And that's been the charmed life that Clay Helton has lived. Even going into this season, we didn't expect USC to really be a factor on the field, and yet they are 3-0 and barking at perhaps getting a berth into the playoff. One of those teams that's got an outside shot to get there, even as they've had some last-second heroics against Arizona and Arizona State to start the season. They've only had one decisive win. That was against a Utah team that hadn't played football before that game. And now you're looking at SC, and you're looking at Korey Foreman perhaps being a linchpin for them. But what I thought was interesting is that Foreman and his family are expecting to take one last visit before his commitment date. His commitment date is January 2nd. In lieu of the All-American Bowl, they're going to have the All-American Showcase Show, which is where the kids are going to be able to announce where they're going to commit and sign for college. I've always loved that about the All-American Bowl. In between snaps of football, you get cuts to families, you get cuts to the kids who are going to announce they're going to Michigan, they're going to Oklahoma, they're going to SC, they're going to Florida. Adrian Peterson famously saying, I'm going to Oklahoma. Joe Mixon, I'm going to Oklahoma. Darian Green Warren, I'm going to Matter of fact, Mama, where are we going? then we going to Michigan. Like, I really love that stuff. And I love knowing that some of the kids feel some kind of way about being able to get there, right? Like, Dwight McGlothern really stuck out for me because he was so excited to say that he was going to LSU at the All-American Bowl. And that is where we will find out what Korey Foreman is going to do. Now, the crystal balls give about a 60% lead to SC, as I mentioned. But LSU and Georgia have both been in the mix in a tremendously large way, right? So much so that he has traveled to Baton Rouge, hung out with Mason Smith, who we feel is an LSU lean and a defensive tackle and a buddy of his. He's hung out with Garrett Nussmeier, who is the quarterback that's committed to that 2021 class. He's hung out with Rajon Davis. And if they're able to add Foreman and Mason Smith to an already ridiculously awesome class, they have a chance to finish as the number one class in recruiting. It might be the only good thing we get to say about LSU in 2020, as they've been slapped with self-reported violations. They have an ongoing sexual assault scandal on their campus, and they suck on the football field. It has not been fun to be an LSU fan. And while I've been dunking on LSU fans basically for the last 4 months because I told them they were going to catch 5 losses even before the season started, even I'm getting a little bit tired of it because I don't want you to be in this sort of trouble. I don't want anybody to have to deal with this sort of trouble. I also want to see your program get cleaned up, and I would love for Ed Orgeron to go front and center on that. But is that going to stop a Korey Foreman, a Tristan Lay, a Mason Smith from committing there? These are all good questions. The way that Georgia's been recruiting probably has the most to do with why they are ranked inside the top 10 in the college football playoff. They've won 2 of the last 3 recruiting national championships, finishing atop the 247 Sports Composite rankings. And we understand what kind of talent is on display for Kirby Smart. But Kirby Smart is venturing into this category that is littered with the dead bodies of James Franklin, of Jim Harbaugh, and of Tom Herman, and that you're doing the most, or you're doing the least with the most. You ought to be winning national championships with the caliber of player that you've had come through there. You've had Kearis Jackson alongside George Pickens. You've also had Zamir White and James Cook and DeAndre Swift and Nick Chubb and Sonny Michel. You've also had Jake Fromm and Jacob Eason and Justin Fields, who we will never, ever, ever let you forget you had. You've also had J.R. Reed, who was a Paycom Jim Thorpe Award finalist and my pick to win it last year. You've had Richard LeCount. You've had Eric Stokes. You've had monsters in the middle. Monty Rice is a dude you groomed into being an outstanding player. And yet you're not going to play for an SEC championship, let alone for a college football playoff national championship. Now there's Korey Foreman. And where is he going to take his last visit before he takes the plunge? Clemson. Going to give them one last opportunity to impress he and his family. And we know what Brent Venables' defensive line has done. We know what Brent Venables' defensive line is capable of. We also know that they put dudes into the league, and that was where he's first committed. But the dark horse coming on strong here seems to be Arizona State. Herm Edwards, Antonio Pierce, Marvin Lewis, all dudes doing the most to recruit this kiddo out of L.A., which is to say, they are not necessarily moved by your blue blood status or by your status of having played in a college football playoff or in a national championship, as proof with USC. But they also want to know that you're going to develop him into the kind of kid that can play at the next level. Herm Edwards, Marvin Lewis, Antonio Pierce have tremendous NFL pedigree that nobody's going to argue with. And they were right there in that game against USC. They probably should have won that game, if not for some real late heroics from Drake London and Keaton Slovis in the final drive of the game. I would be terrified of Arizona State next year if I'm USC or anybody else in the Pac-12 South, because I think they could be that good. And if you get to add a guy like Korey Foreman, you get to vault into the conversation to win the Pac-12 championship and make the college football playoff, because now we're respecting your roster as much as anything else. So let's keep an eye on what Korey Foreman is doing and how he feels going into his January 2nd announcement. With that, let's check the chat.